welcome to You Make Sense. This podcast is a manual to understanding your human experience so that you can navigate the world with freedom, ease, empowerment, and create the life that you desire. Remember, you make sense, all parts, always. Today, we're going to talk about the experience of burnout. It's not possible to understand this experience nor change it without understanding our autonomic nervous system, because this is the vehicle through which we experience burnout itself. So I first just want to give you an overview in broad strokes of what this nervous system is all about and how we go through our nervous system and land in this place of burnout. So our autonomic nervous system has a hierarchy or order to it. That means there's a way, or a path rather, through which we experience it. And if you're wanting to know, by the way, more about the autonomic nervous system, that's really, of course, the foundation of all the work we do here. But I've got some episodes at the beginning of this podcast when it first came into the world that you can go listen to learn more about it. But just in terms of broad strokes, I want to give you an overview or understanding of it. We have 4 primary states within our autonomic nervous system, and I want you to think of that as perhaps you can think of it like a town, okay? It's an entire experience or a place. When you are in that town, everything about your experience is a result of what it's like to be there inside of that state. So it affects your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, perception of self, others, and the world around you. It's literally creating your entire experience. So as I named a moment ago, there's a hierarchy or order that we go into and come out of this autonomic nervous system. So I like to think of that like a highway. At the top of the highway, imagine that's the road north, there is your ventral vagal complex. So that's our state of regulation in our nervous system. And we only go there when our nervous system has decided we're safe. And when we're there, we experience ease, joy, fulfillment, pleasure, connectivity, curiosity, all the wonderful things that we want. Now, if we go south on the highway, the first state that we come into after leaving regulation is our sympathetic nervous system. So this is a state of dysregulation or active self-protection. And you may have heard this referred to as fight or flight. So when we're here, we experience things like anxiety, worry, frustration, fear, terror, rage, an overwhelm of energy in our bodies. It feels like there's a ticking time bomb, like there's never enough time, there's so much to do, I have to get it all done. So it's this overwhelm of stimulation and a lot of mobilizing. Now, if we keep going down the highway, the next state that we get to is called our dorsal vagal complex. Our dorsal vagal complex is our state of immobilization. So think of it like the polar opposite of that sympathetic place. It is all about energy conservation or shutdown. So when we're here, we don't have an overwhelm of energy, we're lacking energy. You can even think of it like a bear going into hibernation. So this is where apathy, being in a funk is, feeling disconnected from our truth. No matter how much I sleep, I feel exhausted. We feel incapable when we're here. This is where shame and regret lives, hopelessness, depression, dissociation, and other flavorings of that sort of experience. So it's also important to know there's this exit on the highway in between your sympathetic nervous system and your dorsal vagal complex that's called freeze. Freeze is tonic immobility, or think of it like deer in headlights. And it's equal parts your sympathetic nervous system, so I have all of this energy, met with that state of shutdown, your dorsal vagal complex, which renders us stuck as these 2 equal and opposite forces come together. If you have the ability right now, what I would invite you to do so that you can feel what this state is like, with both hands, I want you to push together as hard as you possibly can. So taking both hands and pushing against one another. What you'll notice is, keep doing that, push as hard as you can. What you'll notice is it takes a lot of energy and effort to stay stuck. So I'm not moving, but there's so much energy inside of my system right now. And then you can pause. So that state of freeze takes a lot of energy to be in. It's an I have to, but I can't experience. I need to do this thing. There's an urgency around it, but I can't do it, but I need to do it, but I can't do it, but I need to do it. I need to leave this relationship. I can't leave this relationship. I need to start this business. I can't start this business. I need to get back to that person. I can't get back to that person. So that's our state of freeze. So what's really important to understand is if you're at the top of the highway, you're in that ventral state, you're a vehicle, okay? You're like a car driving the highway. And what's going to happen is when you come into dysregulation, the first place that we go is our sympathetic nervous system because that's the first stop on the highway. That's where we go into mobilizing. It's also important to note that you can go straight down to your dorsal vagal complex on the highway, so the last stop on the highway, and it might feel like you didn't go through sympathetic, but in terms of what's going on in your nervous system, you did go through it. It just happened very fast. It can happen in a split second. But that general order or hierarchy is we go from ventral to sympathetic, possibly to freeze, that exit off the highway, and down to dorsal. That means that in order to come up to regulation, if we're in dorsal, we have to go through sympathetic. We might even take a stop in freeze in order to get into regulation. So the experience of burnout is when we start in regulation. So our nervous systems are in safety. There isn't a rush. There is enough time. We're capable and able. And we find ourselves mobilizing in that sympathetic nervous system. So I'm in this hustle culture that a lot of us live in. Go, 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 go. The thing is, our nervous system can only stay in that sympathetic state for so long before it says, we're not able to keep up with this energy output. It is too much for our organ system. It is too much for our immune system. And we can't function in this way any longer. And not only that, but being in this state of dysregulation doesn't seem to be evading the threat, meaning it doesn't seem to be making the problem go away. So what happens is our nervous system will bring us into either that state of freeze or that state of our dorsal vagal complex. And so the process of burnout is really going from that sympathetic state of hypermobilization, go, 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 go. And if we're not listening to our nervous system and bringing regulation to it as it's talking to us, by the way, your nervous system talks to you in the form of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So you'll start to experience things like, I have heightened anxiety. Now I'm not sleeping. I'm noticing I'm getting sick all the time. I'm noticing I'm developing even things like autoimmune diseases. I'm having hair loss occur. I'm holding on to weight and can't seem to lose it. My anxiety is turning into panic or frustration or agitation. I'm snapping at the people around me. So those are all clues that my nervous system is coming into a heightened sympathetic, and it is trying very, very hard to continue on for us to evade the threat that it thinks is at hand. But in order to be in a heightened state of sympathetic, every organ system in our body has to reduce the amount of energy that it usually uses to function properly, and that extra energy is going towards our survival. So you can think of it this way: your GI tract, your liver, your gallbladder, your immune system, they're all giving up their energy reserves in order for the greater good, which is your survival. Now, short term, that's not a problem, but long term stays in this state of dysregulation means that those organ systems are not functioning optimally. And the result of that over time is things begin to break down. We have inflammation in our bodies. We start to develop disease. And so all of those things I named are the symptoms of long-term sympathetic. And if we aren't listening to those symptoms and bringing our nervous systems up the highway towards regulation, eventually those symptoms are going to grow, and then we're going to find ourselves going down the highway into a deeper state of dysregulation, that dorsal vagal complex. And that is the end stages of burnout, where chronic fatigue lives, where we might have to stop doing the job that we're doing or whatever it is that we're burnt out around. We feel like we're not capable of doing our simple daily tasks. So I want to talk about 3 primary reasons why we find ourselves going down this road of dysregulation and ending in burnout. One of the primary reasons is having a protective part that is oriented towards striving and doing. So we all have many parts and versions of us. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. It's not just adult us. We have these protectors that developed over time, and their job is to ensure our safety and survival. So if at some point in my life I either felt unsafe inside, so there was chaos that I was navigating internally because of unresolved trauma, or perhaps I've had experiences where love was conditional, what I may have done is developed a brilliant doer protector part whose job is to constantly mobilize to receive external validation. So this part is dead set on ensuring my safety and survival. And if it has to choose between me experiencing things like I named, like hair loss and chronic stress and getting colds all the time and all of that, or me being lovable, or me belonging, or me being safe, it will always choose that. So this doer part takes over the steering wheel, and it will set bars for us in our lives that are probably unrealistic for us. And then as soon as we get to that bar, it raises the bar. It is this chronic and endless hamster wheel of striving that is not going to allow us to thrive because we're approaching this from a place of survival. And in order for us to thrive, our systems need the ebb and flow of doing and producing and feeling purposeful, and then deep rest and connectivity and pleasure and all of those kinds of things. If we are not replenishing ourselves, then we're going to continually tax our nervous system, which brings us further into dysregulation and down our autonomic highway. Another reason why we can find ourselves in burnout is because so many of us are desensitized from our needs. So let's say I grew up in my childhood and needs were really minimized. Maybe it was a tough love kind of environment where the virtue of doing all of the time and producing was really celebrated, and the idea of resting was seen as weakness. So, or even having needs, by the way, was seen as weakness. So what my nervous system learns is, in order to belong in this environment, I really need to follow suit and be in this place of disconnecting from what my body is telling me and disconnecting from my internal rhythm, and instead continuing on in this really unsustainable way, all because my nervous system is saying, this is what must happen in order for us to be safe, in order for us to survive. And it's also important to name when we've experienced trauma, there's a disconnection from our embodied experience. So it's not even like I am ignoring the signals that my body is giving me. I'm not even hearing them. And our toleration for pain goes up exponentially when we've experienced trauma or neglect. So when someone who hasn't experienced that reaches a point, for example, of, they worked 8 hours today and they're feeling tired, they will really feel that experience of being tired because, historically speaking, when they had a need, they didn't have to desensitize from it. It was actually met and continually and consistently met. So they have a sensitivity to what's actually occurring inside of their system. So they're going to say, I need to stop working. Now, if we've experienced trauma, our needs were not met, we were neglected. When I get to 8 hours of work and I'm feeling tired, my system says, we can do more. I can push through. So, of course, we could do more, but perhaps we shouldn't. The impulse, though, is always going to be, I can, therefore I will. And that's the desensitization to our natural rhythms and natural impulses that happen when we've experienced trauma or neglect. And long term, when we continue to override our nervous system like that, we step by step drive further and further down that autonomic highway, deeper into dysregulation. Another reason why burnout happens is because our culture is one that is designed around productivity. So it is celebrated when we override our nervous systems. When I am saying I can do more, right? I can do more at work. I'm the person that always says yes to everything. I will work on the weekends. I'll email at night. You can count on me. And it's celebrated. And I might continue to get, raises and positive affirmation when I do that, and a lot of success in my work. And so our nervous system and our parts say, hey, this is actually giving me an external result. And so our systems become oriented to doing from a place of survival rather than doing from a place of regulation. In fact, our nervous systems might say, I'm not sure that anything will even get done from regulation because that's not how I usually mobilize. And so for a lot of people who've experienced burnout and they have this doer part that's always on the go, when I invite in approaching things from regulation, the inclination or the felt sense experience becomes fear. Like, well, if I'm regulated, nothing will get done. It'll be like I'm sitting on a beach forever and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills and nothing's going to be able to get done and my whole career is going to dissolve because I'm just regulated. How do you do anything from that place? So we actually have to show our nervous systems, which we'll talk about in a little bit, how to actually orient towards regulation and producing and doing from this place. So anyway, we get a lot of positive reinforcement from mobilizing from dysregulation. In our friendships, we might be the person that people say, we can always count on you. Because I am so used to overriding myself. Even though I'm exhausted today, you can always count on me. Yeah, I'll come over and help you pack up your house, even though I really need to sleep, because I'm the person that always shows up. It's a lack of being deeply connected to my natural rhythms and impulses, and instead I am doing from a place of survival. And again, if that doer part is present and they take over the steering wheel, they can push us to very far places. For me, I've experienced burnout myself, and I can tell you that if you aren't in the driver's seat, this protective part, this doer part, is going to push and push and push and push until your body comes into this deep dorsal place of collapse. So when we have these doer parts present and we are in those earlier stages of burnout where we're in the hypermobilization, what we can tend to do in our overriding of our needs and our impulses is we begin to push things aside that are really important to us. So we begin to encroach on our sleep. So we're no longer getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep. It becomes 7, it becomes 6. And the less sleep that we're getting, the more it creates inflammation in our body, the more it exacerbates the dysregulation that we feel. We'll also begin to put aside things like connection. Connection is a primary human need. It's very common that when we're in this hypermobilized state, everything else goes to the wayside, including connection with our own form of spiritual practice, connection with friends, connection with community. We'll also disconnect or put aside pleasure and joy and fun and things like movement. By the way, movement is an incredibly important thing for our nervous systems to stay in regulation. So after I sit in front of my computer for 10 hours a day, I'm exhausted, and then I sit on the couch and I watch TV for an hour before I pass out. So I'm not experiencing movement in my body, which is so important in discharging that mobilizing energy of our sympathetic nervous system. So I'm going further and further down that highway. We're not fueling our bodies properly. So I'm not eating things that are going to be really supportive to bring regulation to my nervous system. Here's a really good example. It's very important that we start our day with high protein, low sugar meals. And by the way, to start your day with a meal is very important too. This helps to stabilize blood sugar and to not spike our cortisol. Now, if we're in this state of burnout already, here's what's going on. I'm not sleeping well. I'm exhausted. And a very common thing that people do is they use caffeine as an artificial fuel of energy. So I start my day and I'm not eating a breakfast, or I'm eating like a croissant or something sweet. And then I'm having 3 cups of coffee. All of that brings me further and further into dysregulation. And I'm using that as almost like fake fuel, right? It's not actually coming from a place of regulation, and that exacerbates the dysregulation that we feel. Now, the further we get into this stress response, we start to deprioritize really important things in our lives, like our community and relationships. That seems to be oftentimes one of the things that goes first. And remember, if our nervous system has to choose between us having a fulfilled life or surviving, it will always choose surviving 10 out of 10 times. So we start to deprioritize that. We also deprioritize romantic relationships. So I see this a lot where people are striving so much in their career. There's this part of them that says, I won't be valuable unless I'm the best or unless I'm succeeding all of the time. And so the truest self part of them that might really feel like they want to have a life partner or they want to have a family of their own, that gets pushed to the side. And it's later on that at some point in their life where perhaps they come out of this dysregulation and we say, oh my gosh, 5 years went by, 8 years went by, what happened? And it's because we were in this chronic state of dysregulation. We also tend to put things aside like our hobbies. And there was a point in my life where someone actually asked me, like, what do you like to do? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you besides working. That's what I do. I work all the time. And this is a really common thing where we devalue the things that fill us up because those protective parts are saying, I don't see that as beneficial to me. What is the outcome that I'm going to get that's actually bringing me closer to the love or the safety or whatever it is that I desire? So that seems wasteful. So we start to deprioritize those things. And that also happens if we did not experience nourishment and being nurtured as a child. If we were neglected, it's very common that we will push those things aside. Now, the more that we do all of that, the more that I'm hypermobilizing, the more I'm not nourishing these very important components of life, the more dysregulated we become. And things like I named start to occur, like the development of autoimmune diseases, like I'm sick. This would happen to me. I was sick. It felt like I was sick every other week of my life, just chronically and constantly sick. Why? Because when we're in this hypermobilized state, our immune systems are extraordinarily taxed. So that means that it can't fight off a simple cold. And I would get colds all the time. We develop gut issues. As I named, we can start losing our hair, skin issues, sleep, chronic anxiety. And then when our nervous systems say, I can't do this anymore, that hypermobilization, we find ourselves landing in our dorsal vagal complex where we experience chronic fatigue. And now all of a sudden I went from being able to do 10 trillion things a day to feeling like I cannot do anything. I can't even get out of bed. I am exhausted all of the time. And those are the final stages of what it's like to be in burnout. What I really want you to see here is there is actually a road that we're walking as we are in this experience of burnout. And it's so important that we begin listening to the signals that our nervous system is giving us, the clues it's giving us. When we start to notice things like my anxiety is really increasing, or my sleep isn't so great, or I'm getting sick a lot. Or I'm feeling agitated or frustrated towards my partner, or this is all consuming and I'm cutting other things out of my life that are important to me. Those are all the symptoms of going into burnout. And for most of us, we either don't notice those symptoms, or because culture is really, celebrating us continuing down this path, we just continue along this journey until we reach these final stages. So when we're in this place of chronic fatigue or feeling entirely burnt out, entirely shut down, what happens is our nervous system then clocks whatever it is that brought us into burnout as dangerous. So for example, let's say that you're an ER doctor and you have gone into this state of immobilization or shutdown as the result of chronic overriding and burnout. And now you can't work for a while and you're taking a leave of absence, your nervous system is going to say, do not go back into that experience because that experience is dangerous for us. And I see this happen a lot. A lot of people come to me when they've experienced burnout and they feel a fear of ever going back into that environment. And what's really important to know is the first step is not addressing going back into that environment. The first step is addressing our taxed nervous system. So when we've reached this place, we have a highly sensitized and exhausted nervous system that needs our tending. So think about this. If someone had run, an ultra marathon and they're exhausted, would it be smart to say, hey, let's go run another marathon or let's go do more hard work? No, their muscle needs time to repair. Their body needs time to repair. And that's true for us when we reach this place too. I want you to know, as somebody who's experienced this myself, it is absolutely possible to come out of burnout. What is needed, and the most important thing, is addressing and regulating our nervous system and coming back up that highway to regulation. Now, as we're doing this, we want to engage in things that are really soothing for our nervous system, not things that are bringing higher levels of stress response into our system. So if you are here, this is not the time to do things like cold exposure or intensive breath work or HIIT training. So high interval training where I am spiking my heart rate and then coming down and spiking my heart rate and coming down because I'm increasing adrenaline and cortisol in my body when I'm doing all of these things. And my system has experienced adrenal fatigue, so I don't want to be doing that. Instead, I want to be leaning into regulation that's gentle and nourishing. By the way, walking is one of the most profoundly regulating things that you can do. Our species has been doing this for a very, very long time. So if you slowly walk, every single day for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or by the way, move your body in any way that you have the ability or capacity to do, it begins to bring regulation to your nervous system. So things like walking, that's also bilateral stimulation, which regulates our nervous system too. Walking, swaying, humming. Yoga Nidra is a beautiful way to regulate our nervous systems. Yoga in general, doing exercise like Pilates, that's a great gentle way. And by the way, not easy if anyone's done Pilates, but it's not going to spike your heart rate in the same exact way as doing like HIIT training. So gentle mobilization is really important. And it's also important to name that when you're in that dorsal state, it's going to feel really counterintuitive. Your system is going to be in this immobilized place. So think of it like a bear hibernating. So if I asked a bear hibernating to go for a walk, it's going to say, what? I'm hibernating. I cannot go for a walk. So just know there's going to be resistance to this. And what we need to do is going to feel quite counterintuitive at first. What you'll notice though is if you can engage in let's say a 10-minute walk, that experience will support your nervous system to begin coming out of that immobilized place that I'm in. And so it's really important that we bring in gentle regulating experiences. And inside of the programs that I offer, I have lots of therapeutic somatic regulating tools that you can use, but also you have lots of things in your life that bring regulation to you as well. That is simply anything that supports you to feel more present and here. And so usually these are things that register as good for you. I want to name that they are not things that support you to numb. So if you scroll Instagram and it's been 3 hours and it feels like 3 minutes, that's numbing. It's something that supports you to feel more present, here, and good. And those are the things that we want to engage in. Another really important thing that we want to focus on is our bedtime hygiene. It's very important if we've experienced burnout that we're nourishing ourselves with deep rest. And that isn't just about spending 8 hours in bed. It's what I'm doing before I go to bed and actually throughout the day that supports me to have deep rest. So it's really important to get morning light, to get sunset light. Both of those help to set our circadian rhythm. In the morning, it tells our system it's time to start our day. And at night, it's telling our system it's time to unwind for the day and come into deeper rest and relaxation. Other things that I talk about a lot that are really important is disconnecting from work at night. This is something that a lot of us struggle with. We might stop working, but I am still energetically tied to it, meaning I have all kinds of balls rolling in my head and I'm thinking about all the things that have to get done. So something that I do every night is I call it my commute because I work from home. So that means that I will leave my house and go for a walk without looking at my phone and connect to nature around me. By the way, nature is a very important thing to connect with when we're coming out of burnout too. So in doing that, I am slowing down and I am disconnecting energetically from that which was a lot throughout my day, which allows my system to come into a deeper state of rest at night. Another thing that's really important before bed is that we evoke our state of stillness. And stillness is when we're in regulation, but we're really slowing. So using things that support us to come into this state, that might be listening to calming music or the sound of a sound bath or nature, taking an actual bath, journaling, reading, all things that help us to slow are really, really important. And then making sure that we get to bed at the same time every day. The more that we do this, our system begins to rebound, and it's supporting our internal organs and our nervous system as a whole to come back into a state of regulation after it's been in this deep state of shutdown. Again, as I named, when you're in a state of shutdown, nothing is going to feel exciting to you, and you're going to feel exhausted all of the time. So some of the things I'm naming are going to feel really counterintuitive, like exercise, for example, which we want to do. The same goes for connection. So when I'm in this deep state of shutdown, the last thing I want to do is connect, and I feel so exhausted that I couldn't possibly do it. When we can lean into even 30 minutes of connecting with another person, oftentimes that what we find is our tiredness was not actual tiredness. Our tiredness was coming from dysregulation. So leaning into a tolerable amount of connection regularly is really important for us to come out of this experience of burnout. Next, we want to work with this doer part. So here's the thing. If you don't get to know your parts and you don't take over the steering wheel or driver's seat of your life in your nervous system, they're going to keep taking that steering wheel and they're going to be guiding your life. And so the only way to get that doer part to stop doing their job is for you to show up and protect the vulnerable part that they're currently protecting. So getting to know the parts of ourselves that feel like as we are is not enough, that the only way we'll be loved is in our doing, that it's not safe to slow. The more you become the safe adult for those vulnerable parts, the more that doer part is willing to relinquish their job. Otherwise, I'm going to be in this exhaustive battle with them, and that protector is going to continue to come online. And another thing that's really important to name with burnout is this isn't something that's solved with a long weekend away. Like, I'll take 4 days off and I'll go on a vacation somewhere and then I'll come back feeling rested. If I have spent, for me, it was like years going further and further and further into deeper dysregulation, all the way down to this place of shutdown, taking 4 days to rest, of course, is a good thing. But that isn't going to solve the problem. It's sort of like thinking that, if I pulled my hamstring, 4 days of icing it is going to heal that muscle. It's going to take some time. And not only time, but it's going to take lifestyle changes. So this isn't something where we can just say, you know what, I will rest on the weekends now and everything's going to get better, even though throughout the week I am consistently and chronically overriding our nervous system. Another thing I want to say is I don't want you to expect that you change all of this overnight. If I have gotten into this habituated patterning when I was for myself, like literally in elementary school, this started for me, it's going to take a little bit of time to orient to a new way of being and to show my parts that it's safe to be experiencing the world in this other way. And at the beginning, I talked about experiencing life from regulation. We have to collect data points to show our parts in our nervous system that it's actually safe and possible for us to have wild amounts of success and fulfillment and financial abundance from regulation. Our nervous system just won't know at first that that's actually possible. So we want to make incremental changes to our daily life. Here are some simple examples. So, as I named before, we want to start our day with nourishing our body with high levels of protein, which helps again to not spike cortisol and adrenaline in our bodies, and lower our caffeine intake. Something as simple as that will begin supporting your nervous system to come closer to regulation. We also want to minimize the external activation that we're bringing into our lives. So think about this. Is the first thing you do in the morning looking at your phone? If so, what you're doing is you are bringing in more gasoline to that sympathetic state you are already in. So, by the way, at first, trying not to look at your phone in the morning is not going to be easy. You might notice like you have the intention of doing it and holy crap, I'm picking up my phone and I'm looking at it. What happened? How am I possibly looking at my phone? I told myself I wasn't going to look at my phone and I'm looking at my phone and now I've looked at news for 15 minutes and I've increased my dysregulation. So it might be starting with literally 5 minutes, or even 2 minutes, I'm going to put my feet on the ground, I'm going to put my hand on my chest, and I'm just going to breathe for 2 minutes. Just breathe in fully and out. When you do this, try to breathe out until there's no air left, a little further than you think you can even breathe. Fully emptying our lungs is really important in terms of trying to bring our nervous systems further into regulation. So just do that just for a couple of minutes. It might start with a 3-minute meditation or doing some gentle stretching or having a cup of tea or maybe matcha instead of coffee, which doesn't spike your cortisol quite as much. Instead. And then I can look at my phone. So again, we want to set realistic expectations for ourselves on changing the way we orient to our day-to-day life. And then throughout the day, can I actually take pauses? If you sit in a chair all day long, it is incredibly important that you get up and move your body throughout the day. And if you're saying, well, I don't really have that much time, all you need is a couple minutes, 3 minutes, throw a song on and move your body, or just shake your body, or even something like jumping up and down to move energy through my system are all incredibly helpful. Going outside and feeling the sun on your face, getting sun exposure every day. So we just impart small moments. Another thing is taking a lunch break. And this is something I would do. I would take a 2-minute break, 5-minute break, and I would eat over the sink, and then I'd run back into a meeting. So instead of doing that, can I actually take 15 minutes? Maybe it starts with that. And I'm going to eat without doing emails, without looking at a screen. All of this begins to show our nervous system it is safe to slow. Nothing bad happens when I slow. And not only that, but the more that you are regulated, the higher you're able to produce. Productivity goes way up. Creativity goes way up when we're in regulation, but we have to begin showing our nervous system that is actually possible. So what will begin to happen is we're going to come out of that deep dorsal state. Again, it will feel counterintuitive because it requires us to push towards mobilizing when all our system wants to do is collapse. But the more that you do that, gently, slowly, we come up the highway and we come out of that shutdown state and we'll be back in our sympathetic nervous system. Remember, in order to get to regulation, we have to go through that sympathetic state. And that means we're going to have to continue regulating through that activation until we land in regulation. Now, it's also important that we decouple this overcoupling of my work that got me into burnout being a dangerous place, if it is something that you want to go back into and reorient yourself to. So before going back in, what I really want you to do is make some commitments for yourself. How do I need to orient in this situation to be nurturing and nourishing myself? So what kind of boundaries do I need to set with my place of work, with myself, if it's your own company? And what things do I need to put in place throughout my day that supports me to continue coming up the highway instead of going down further into regulation? So regulating becomes a way of life. For me, regulating is just a natural part of the way I experience everything in my life. So if I'm in my car, I'm going to listen to music that I find regulating. That'll change, depending on what I'm feeling. Throughout my day, I go outside and I will look at leaves on trees. I will smell flowers. I will hold a cup of hot tea and really feel the heat in my hand. I'll find myself reflexively swaying in my chair. I know that's a clue that my system's saying, hey, we need you to regulate. And the more that we make it a way of life, the more we build our resiliency and our ability to navigate stress. And not only that, to listen to the natural rhythms of our bodies. So if you're finding yourself at any point or any juncture in the experience of burnout, I want you to know it is so very possible to come out of this, and it's regulating our nervous systems that is necessary. Bringing regulation to your nervous system is not only the foundation of all healing, it is the foundation that is necessary to live a full, happy life. Your nervous system is the key that has the power to either keep you stuck living a life that is smaller than you feel called to, or unlocking the life you are here to live. Navigating Your Nervous System is my 6-week live online program that is meant to give you the therapeutic, tangible somatic tools necessary to regulate your nervous system so that you can live the life you are here to live and feel better in your body in the process. You can join the waitlist for limited time money off the program. Check the show notes to join. Before we get to the first question, I just want to remind you that if you have a question or questions that arise as you're listening to this podcast, we want to know what they are. So we have a link in the show notes for you to submit a question, and you can do that anonymously, whether it's a video question, an audio question, or a written one. So let's get to the first one that we have today.
Hi, Sarah. So I feel like I've been super stuck since 2019. I left London where I lived and went back to my home country, Austria. And I was in a narcissistic relationship, so I got out of it and was diagnosed with a burnout. And obviously, I feel like the burnout wasn't all that my problem was. Definitely, and I still am traumatized. And I think the most difficult thing is that since then I've been really stuck work-wise, and also I don't know where to go anymore because I would love London so much, and I can't get myself to find another home in this world. Also, I find it hard to get working again, and I can't make sense of my life since the last 6 years. I think that's my worst problem, to not find a sense why things were happening as they were.
So something that I didn't name earlier in the episode that I'm so happy to share with you now is that burnout doesn't just happen because of our work or because of our purpose. Burnout can happen in any scenario or situation where we are chronically, over a period of time, overriding our nervous system. So for this person, in this example of being in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, I'm going to have to continue to override my nervous system and my own needs in order for this relationship to function. And so that consistent overriding and disregarding of my own needs in order to survive, in order for the relationship not to end, over time, that begins to bring me further and further and further into dysregulation. So again, we can often think that it just has to do with our work, but it can happen around anything where I'm overriding myself. So something that this person named was, I can't seem to find a sense of home anywhere else. And that's because more often than not, when we enter a relationship, if we haven't done parts work with our parts yet, and we haven't resolved some of those traumas from the past, then our younger parts are going to be looking to that partner to be their rescuer and to be the home they never got. And it doesn't matter if that person isn't right for us. Our parts are saying, hey, this is the only person that's around, and therefore, it doesn't matter if that person isn't right for us or they're not meeting our needs. If our younger parts don't have adult us, they're going to look for our partner to rescue them. So a big part of the work that's needed here is to create the internal home that those parts need for us. The more that we do that, it actually brings regulation to our nervous system, because those parts that are feeling scared are going to chronically be experiencing dysregulation that, of course, we experience via our bodies. So that work is very, very important to begin doing. Another thing that I think is really important to address here is the imperative nature of creating community. Humans cannot thrive in isolation. And I understand that it can be very hard to find our people. The beautiful thing is now with the internet, we can find communities all around the world. And it might be something as simple as, thinking about a hobby that you have been interested in looking into, or a cause that you're really interested in, and joining some kind of group or a club. Or it might be joining a healing container. In all of these scenarios, I know that I'm going to be coming into an experience where I feel understood and seen by others in a safe way. And that supports our nervous systems to not only create a foundation of safety and connection and home and community, but also to come into regulation. And then lastly, when we've experienced toxic relationships in the past, or relationships that weren't safe, we can tend to have protective parts that say, I'm never going to get into a relationship again because I'm afraid the same thing is going to happen, especially if we have this habituated pattern of that occurring. What I really want you to know is that the more that you reparent your parts, you're literally imprinting new childhood experiences. I mean, I'm giving myself what I never got. So your baseline for what love is changes. Because I am meeting my own needs and I'm having expectations of myself to do so, then that means my expectations of others changes. So no longer am I even attracted to or drawn to the person that is not meeting my needs or whom I feel invisible with. I am not attracted to that. And instead, I'm attracted to people whom are mirroring back to me what I've given myself. And so I just want everyone listening to know that there's a lot of hope here and a lot of agency that we have to create change. So let's go to the next question that we have today.
Hi, Sarah. Would love your advice. I've found that every moment of my life where I'm expanding, or I feel like I'm moving forward, or I'm trying new things, or I feel like I'm really living, or I have a rich personal life, or I'm able to meet a romantic partner, has been when I'm not working. When I have a job, it feels like it takes all of my capacity. I wonder why other people are able to have a job and a family and a personal life and a romantic life and hobbies, when for me, I just don't have any energy or capacity left over. After my work, it takes over.
First, I want to say a lot of us are met with an uphill battle when it comes to work and setting boundaries. As I named earlier in this episode, we live in a time in the world where what is expected of us is far beyond what our nervous systems have capacity for. And so we're already dealing with that. Then for many of us, like this person, we can tend to have that doer part that takes over. And when that part takes over, for them, everything is oriented towards survival. So the things that we desire, like a romantic partnership and expanding into the life that we desire and traveling and hobbies, all those things, that goes to the wayside because everything is focused on how do I survive? And one of the ways I learned to do that was through striving. So for this person, I want you to think about, what does it feel like when you're not working? Feel into that version of you. That is adult you. That is the you that is fully embodied and able to listen to the natural impulses and desires inside and follow them. And then I want you to think about whom is actually showing up when I am in these work experiences, and it's not going to be that adult you. We have to get to know who that part is. So I want you to do some inquiry with them. Ask that part how old they are. What are they afraid might happen if they allow you to have a full life? What are they afraid might happen if they relinquish some control that they have? What are they afraid might happen if you are not all consumed with work? What are they afraid might happen if you slow down? So the more that we get to know that part and the more we get to know what they're afraid of, the more we can then come to their aid. And our job is to earn their trust. So at first, these parts are going to be like, I don't believe that it is possible to do it another way. So we have to incrementally show them. That's what I talked about in the recap of the teaching segment of this episode, that we have to actually make this a lifestyle change, but we do it gently, slowly, gently, slowly, gently, slowly, like all things in healing. The whole process is gently, slowly. So I want you to build your capacity for that. And that might start with, after work, one day of the week, I am going to stop at 5 p.m. and I'm going to go to a yoga class, or I'm going to get dinner with a friend. And I'm going to have to tolerate the discomfort of that. It's not going to feel good at first because the protector part's going to say, I don't know if this is safe. I don't think this is safe, actually. And it's going to show up in the form of dysregulation. The more that you do this, the more that you're showing these parts, it's actually safe for us to slow down. It is safe for me to have a balanced life. And I also want to name that many of us struggle with this in general because so much is being asked of us in our work. I own my own company, and so I'm the one creating everything that's occurring. And I can tell you that a lot of times I'm like, who is my boss? Because wow, are they asking a lot of me? Meaning I'm asking of myself that which is beyond my capacity. And so it's really important that we sit down and say, whoa, this has been too much in this last month or couple months or week or whatever. And how do I begin setting boundaries here? And non-negotiable boundaries, which might be like the computer closes at this hour and I'm not opening it. And there's going to be parts that say, this isn't safe, something bad's going to happen. And what they need to see is that nothing bad happens. Yes, that person didn't get a response from me. Sometimes sometimes they might not get a response for a week because I am prioritizing my well-being instead of bringing myself back into this place of overriding, which will lend me or lead me to burnout. And what you begin to see is it's okay. The house doesn't burn down. Nothing bad actually happens. Yeah, there may be consequences like timelines shift, but it is not from a place of survival, and our parts have to see that. The more that we do this incrementally, the more the parts let down that overriding experience that they have so that we can actually have a balanced life. So let's get to the last question that we have today.
Hi, Sarah. My question is around feeling sick and run down and going into dorsal or going into freeze. And I'm wondering how much of that is sort of an appropriate physiological response to being sick or being tired, or if I'm going into dorsal or freeze because my protective parts are coming online and something about being sick or tired or stuck in bed feels threatening. And maybe it's a combination of both. So I would love any clarity around that. Thanks so much.
So a really great prompt we can always ask ourselves is, does my reaction match the circumstance? Now, deep dorsal, that's our dorsal vagal complex. That's our state of immobilization in our nervous system. This is our most extreme form of self-protection. We only go here when our nervous system thinks there is imminent danger. So look at this. If I'm going into dorsal because I have a cold or the flu, is that actually imminent danger where I might die? No, it isn't. So that means my reaction doesn't match the circumstance. And so what we want to look at is, what is this experience of being sick reminding me of? Now, like for me, I used to go into dorsal when I would get sick because it meant I had to be in my childhood home, and that wasn't a safe place. And so anytime I got sick, I would find myself shutting down. So we want to get curious about this. What is this reminding my parts in my nervous system of? When we're sick or tired and it's not life-threatening, the appropriate state to be in would be our ventral vagal complex or state of regulation. So that means that I might be in a place of slowing, like I don't have a lot of energy, I don't really want to move, I'm just going to, maybe just watch TV or read a book and not do much. But I'm really present and here to that experience. I am not disconnecting from my body. A lot of times at the end of a day, so most people, or a lot of people rather, who are experiencing burnout and high stress, we go through this cycle of dysregulation throughout our day where we go from a high sympathetic, and then we get to such a high sympathetic that we crash in dorsal at night and we feel kind of out of it. We're not really fully present. We feel pretty numb, and we think that that's just tired. Tired does not mean disconnected. When we're tired from regulation, we are present to that experience. So we really want to delineate between the two. Just another thing I want to say about getting sick. When we experience burnout, it's very common that we chronically get sick. And another reason why we'll find ourselves getting run down or sick is because we are not properly expressing what we are feeling and experiencing. So if historically in my life it wasn't safe to feel frustration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to internalize that and not even allow myself to access the frustration, which means it goes inside of me. Frustration has an energetic quality to it, right? And so you can think of that almost like it's like poison to our bodies and to our nervous system when that experience is internalized over and over again. For myself, I can tell you that I know immediately if I've been internalizing things because I'll start to get a little bit of a sore throat. I'm not sick. I'm just feeling kind of run down. And when we're actually, and by the way, that's because historically in my life, it wasn't safe to fully express myself. So it's still not, even after doing all of this work, a natural reflex sometimes. But the goal is that we're so acutely aware of our experience, that I'm such an expert in myself and my nervous system, and I'm so embodied that I can tell. So for me, I know if I'm noticing a little bit of a sore throat, if I'm noticing some sinus pressure, that is all a clue that I've internalized something that needs to be externalized. So what I'll immediately do is I'll either go start writing to try to begin externalizing what I'm experiencing, or I'll access the emotion and the affect that is waiting to be expressed. And that might mean I feel into the sensation, I let it grow in my body. Sometimes that sensation may want to make a sound. Sometimes the sensation might want to squeeze something or move something. And what I'm really doing here is I'm discharging that energy out of my system. And I can tell you every single time I do that, within minutes, the sore throat goes away. Within minutes, the sinus pressure begins to relieve, and I don't end up getting sick. If I don't do that and I continue to internalize, usually that means I'm going to get further and further run down and get sick. And by the way, this is what in my life led to having autoimmune diseases, because there was such an onslaught and overwhelm of internalizing the experience. So the more that we are able to externalize that which was not safe to historically speaking, the more we have health in our bodies. So thank you for being with me here today on this episode. Whether you are experiencing burnout or have experienced burnout, for most of us, we have a life that is asking more of us than our nervous system has capacity for. So it's really important that we begin regulating a way of life. And all it takes is moment by moment, turning towards listening to what our internal system needs and giving it to ourselves again and again and again. The more we do that, the more anchored in regulation we are. Enjoying this episode and want to go even deeper into somatic healing? You can join my email community for weekly teachings, tools, and live events. Click the show notes to join.